We call him the investigator, Jimmy Leach, and he's in the house. Good morning.
Hey, good morning, Steve. How you doing?
I'm doing well on this day. We're just talking to Greg Hamlin, Jackson Madison County School System, about a child showing up at school with a gun.
Yeah.
Like I said, you got 12,000 plus students. The one you talk about that day is the one that shows up with a firearm, not the other 12,000. But anyway, looking at that, you've got a column article in the recent Community newspaper here, and it's on school threats.
Yeah, on the crime scene, in the crime scene examiner, and actually wrote the article. Well, I wrote a book on school violence, but I wrote this article before the situation here. One thing that brought it to my mind, we're talking about analyzing threats and reporting them.
Right.
In Florida last week in the middle school, we had a situation where one student saw something that could be important about a
Right.
gun being in a kid's backpack.
Okay.
Reported it to a teacher, and it appears as though that communication kept a bad situation, possibly a bad situation happening. So, the main thing I want to say, Steve, if you hear something from your child, or if you are a student,
Right.
pass it on to the authorities or to the school administration.
So check that in the crime scene this week, and of course the name of the book is
Not in our school.
Not in Our School.
Yeah.
And check that on Jimmy Leach. You can find that Amazon.com. Just check Amazon.
Right.
And Jimmy Leach, Jim. Well, you're right. It's
Yeah,
Jim
Leach.
Leach. Leach.
Yeah.
Jim Leach.
Yes.
And so be sure to check that one out. Well, yesterday was kind of an interesting day with the FBI. Christopher Wray is the director of the FBI. Of course, he was not presiding over the FBI, but the whole report from these highly skilled and highly publicized now gymnasts have been extremely successful in their careers. Talking about years of abuse from the team, the person that was the team physician, that apparently was extensive. That was reported to the FBI, and the contention is, Department of Justice, it was mishandled, that they did not properly document, a reflection of the fact that it was not taken seriously, and then when pushed about it, then they started lying about it.
Yeah.
Right.
Which goes against everything the FBI is famous for.
Well, I started saying, and so it's kind of one more thing. We've had this political, that there has to be a revamping of that image, I think, right, or something.
Yeah, well, one thing, I think the FBI director said something good. And of course, he's offering, he says, I'm heartbroken about this.
Right.
And we've fired people and people have left and this and that.
Right.
Not to say that there might not be some criminal charges on down the road.
Well, the Department of Justice so far has not charged, and that's going to be,
Right.
there'll be political pressure to do that, and so we'll see what happens with
Well,
it.
it takes a minute sometimes to decide,
Okay.
get your ducks in a row, as we say in the country, make sure you got it right. I don't know if they're going to charge or not. I would think falsifying a federal report would be a chargeable thing. But,
Right.
I wondered why the FBI was looking at it anyway. They charged them in state court.
Right.
But anyway, that doesn't really matter. It's bad. It's
Do people get referred to them? I mean, like to whom do you talk? If you're one of these gymnasts, to whom do you go? Right? I mean that's a you think, well, tell somebody. Okay, well, exactly.
The first thing I would do
is then is it happening to other people?
I
don't know.
I would
right?
talk to my local police departments
Okay.
first.
All right.
And go from there. Let them go from there. And they may have called the FBI in because there were so many defendants and they thought it might cross state lines or something like that. I don't know. But it's bad. But one thing, that the director said, he said, don't forget the 37,000 people we got working,
Right.
that are doing good.
Okay.
They're doing good. And one thing I would like to say this, just got, the little gymnast that was in the Olympics,
Right.
the world
Simone Biles.
champion.
Yeah.
She
Stunning
said, if we're trying to help the system. Okay. Now this was individual people making mistakes.
Right.
We had people testifying in Congress against the FBI yesterday.
Right.
The system's working.
Okay.
It's not perfect, and it's never going to be perfect, but it is working.
Okay. What is the situation we got going on in Dyersburg that you mentioned?
Okay. Well, one thing right quick. Last
Yeah.
week I think we talked about where they had the 2 killings in one night up there,
Right.
and
Yeah.
a thing on a bar
Right.
parking lot. They dropped charges. on that.
Charge against the one that they had charged, said it was a self-defense.
Yeah, sure did. So they
Yeah.
went back and looked at the video again, and that night they probably needed to charge somebody to try to calm things. That's not they almost had a riot up there.
Okay.
But what they got this past week, it came up, and it started back about a month ago. Police encountered a lady walking down the street about 7 o'clock in the morning, and obviously something was wrong. And they stopped talking to her. She said a guy tried to rape her, jerked her out, and tried to rape her, threw her down the side of the road. Then at a different point, there was a guy who was caught standing out beside at the corner of a house,
Okay.
watching a kid get on the bus or get on the bus, I think,
Okay.
in the morning. Anyway, he's watching the child get on the bus and watching the school bus, whatever he's looking at, and he was masturbating.
Okay.
Okay, and a guy ran him off. They've looked at the videos. I think it's the same
Same
person.
guy. Okay. Okay, so there's somebody.
which kind of goes around the track of us to
Okay.
a sexual predator type
Okay.
person, which is pretty scary. They've
That's
got
something-
videos.
okay.
You can go to Dyersburg Police Department's website and look at the videos. It's hard to identify people sometimes with video, but especially anybody in that area ought to look at those pictures.
Well, we got a case of a person that was last seen in Utah, travel mates back home in Florida. Where is she?
That's the question, isn't it?
It is a question, and he's
Yeah.
not saying anything.
No. And I'm gonna tell you, a situation like that, well, you can just imagine. If he doesn't say anything at all, it may be, if there is something bad afoot here.
Right,
And I really can't think what else it would be, to tell you the truth, that he
Right.
wouldn't say something.
right.
If he just doesn't say anything at all and something doesn't pop up, somebody saw something, it may be hard to put this thing together. Now, they've come up with a thing out there in that small town in Utah. I think it's a small town out there, where you've had a couple that were shot to death, murdered.
Okay.
That they make a real loose tie to the missing girl and her boyfriend to a couple of days. The times are right, and they could have run into one another at a place where the dead girl works, the girl that got shot to death. They were newlyweds, the ones that got murdered.
Wow.
They don't really have any evidence to tie them together, but it does sound kind of unusual.
Simultaneous.
And it's important to me, looking at it as an investigator for this book, if you got a young boy and girl who are emotionally involved and things get out of hand and one of them does something to the other one, that's one kind of individual.
Okay.
But if you got a person that shot and killed two people and then ended up doing something to the girlfriend, that's a totally different person. That man.
Where do you start as an investigator?
Well, you start with the most obvious. You try your best to put the most obvious suspect in it or out of it, which you cannot always do. Remember John Benet Ramsey?
Right.
You can't always do it. You got to try your best to do it. And then you start, right now, what they've got to do with those, the cell phones, credit card records, if that little girl is still alive, she's got to be getting money from somewhere to live on. But if somebody give it to her or she's getting it to something, it's a real difficult case. Of course, they found where they called, the Utah police had been called on them.
Right.
Police there in Utah where he
Yeah.
slapped her or she slapped
Right.
him or something,
Right. Jimmy Lacey, investigator with us. This is posted, will be posted on Tennessee Underground on Facebook and at tugnews.com. Tennessee man gets swatted, which is something I wasn't familiar with, where people now on the internet, if you got a domain name or a Twitter handle or whatever that they want, that they feel is marketable,
Yeah.
are now organizing purposeful abuse of people in order to try to force them to surrender or sell their internet name or their
Yeah.
Twitter handle or whatever.
That's terrible.
And apparently a lucrative business out there worth thousands of dollars, to the point that one woman was targeted and they would do things to her like they would order a pizza delivery for every pizza place in town every 10 minutes to be delivered to her house. And it's like, this kind of stuff is not going to stop until you surrender this name. They took it to a whole different level in Tennessee with a man that they faked a voice saying, I've got a bomb in my house. And so what happens?
Police show up.
Show up,
The
ready.
cavalry showed up.
Showed up, yeah.
The guy saw him, evidently saw it and caused him to have a heart attack.
Heart attack.
And
Because
died.
they ordered him to crawl out from under, through a gap in his deck or whatever. He has a heart attack
Yeah, and
because his house is suddenly surrounded by it.
Yeah.
And they know who did it.
they're charged.
Yeah.
They've been convicted.
Convicted. The one man sentenced to prison, but the young man who actually did the voice was 17 years of age. He's in England and still has not been charged.
Yeah, right. He's like an unindicted.
I didn't know this
conspirator.
was going on.
I didn't either. I'd never heard
Yeah,
it before.
yeah.
And as a matter of fact, you talk about the pizzas. Before they discovered that this fellow was dead, they delivered a pizza to his, I think his daughters, some of his
Right.
relatives, as part of their scheme. They were already delivering pizzas out.
Yeah.
And I read one of the cases that they had
Yeah.
done had been going on for years.
Years. So people being intimidated by this. So, but they did finally. This man was 20 years old that was doing all this on
Yeah.
the internet. But apparently this is a well
And
organized.
I think he was
and I-
17 when it happened.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I didn't realize it was so extensive.
I didn't either.
But a man in Tennessee dies at
But
his
they
home.
they get them. They sell them to
Yeah.
get their name and then they sell it. Yeah.
They feel like it's marketable. He had some handle about Tennessee, number one Tennessee or something that they wanted that he'd had for years.
Yeah.
Got it early,
Yeah.
and before he realized it was marketable, but it was threatening him, and he dies. This is WNWSFM Jackson, WTJSFM Alamo, whatever we do with the talk of Jackson and West Tennessee. One thing before we get away, what about this situation in New York? What's going on here? This officer charged under
Oh, he was the first one to be charged on the New York chokehold law.
Right, right.
They charged him,
Right,
carried it to the grand jury refused to indict.
right, okay.
Yeah,
We have some other cases out here now, where, people are subdued and injected by medics with medications, all this stuff. So there's a lot of this kind of stuff coming under review.
yeah,
That is.
yeah.
Jimmy Leach, the investigator with us. Tom Scuteri. Let me just gobble everything up. Tom Scuteri is on the way with us. Jimmy Leach, the investigator. You can find his work on Amazon and several books. Jim Leach, Leach. This interview and features are posted on Facebook at Tennessee Underground and at tugnews.com. And Jimmy's also doing some independent stuff on these postings about police and work and everything else every week.
Yeah, and we're starting to put a whole lot on our YouTube channel, getting a lot of stuff on. Have one specifically on body language coming up this week.
All right, so be sure to check that out. Tom Scuteri is on the way. This is Blue Suede Forever.